Ka-ching.
Hello everyone, I am Arnold and today I'm joined by Uli, an Azerbaijani woman living in LA, who is the owner of this ice cream shop called Uli Gelateria or Gelateria Uli.
Uli's Gelato.
Uli's
It's
Gelato.
changing.
Uli's Gelato is changing. Great. Thank you for joining me, Uli. So tell us a little about your family background.
Sure. So I was born in Baku. I actually moved to United States fairly recently as a student to go to college. My mother's side of the family is actually from Ağdam. And our family has been in Ağdam for a very long time. They were part of this Bey family, which is like a local nobility. And we can trace my family's lineage in Ağdam in this very old village called Perioğlular to 1700s. In fact, some of my family members, my great-grandfathers, worked with the Khans of Karabakh.
Great. Very interesting.
And I live in LA.
Yeah. And any of your relatives have any history with the First Karabakh War,
Oh, yeah.
with the Karabakh conflict? So what's their story?
One of my cousins is a veteran of the First Karabakh War, especially on the Kazakh front. My paternal grandfather is from Yukarı Eskipara, and my paternal grandmother is from Aşağı Eskipara. And the week that these villages fell, we were in Gaza nearby, and my father took both of my older sisters to Aşağı Eskipara. In his words, this is your last opportunity to see your homeland. And I've talked to my sisters about that a lot, especially during the Second War, because a lot of that trauma came back to them of being over there, riding in a tank, being shot at, and then evacuating very hastily as Armenians were entering the villages. And I know that for them, there's a lot of unresolved trauma in that experience. For me, I was a child. I wasn't at the front, but I was at home crying that Daddy didn't take me to the village without realizing what was happening, even though I was almost 10 years old. And then, a lot of our family members had to leave, and shortly thereafter, they became refugees in a local school. So as a kid, I remember visiting a lot of my family members in these crowded classrooms where there would be 5 to 7, 8 families living in one classroom, and all family members using bathrooms down the hall. So that's my father's side of the family. My mother's side of the family, they have a much sadder story, but a lot of them had to leave Ağdam way before the First War, because not only because of ethnic fights, but also because of persecution by Bolsheviks. But my mother's side of the family, they lived in Ağdam, they lived in Shusha, and some of them also lived in Tət-à-Tет, as it was called and still is called. And it was called Tət-à-Tет during the Soviet Union, but a lot of Azeris call it Hankendi. So that's my story.
Interesting. Wow. So a lot of history with the Karabakh conflict. So it is in many ways close to your heart.
Yes. Yes. And when I was growing up, also, I went to school in an area in Baku called Ermenikent. And that area before the war was a majority Armenian neighborhood in Baku. And unfortunately, during the war, a lot of terrible things happened on both sides, including the pogroms and the population exchange, basically between the two countries. And the area when I went to school in Ermenikent became an area that a lot of refugees, also specifically Azerbaijanis from Armenia, moved into. But there were still some families, mixed families in there, like half Azeri, half Armenian families. So in addition to the wars, I went to a school that had a lot of people, a lot of my friends, classmates were either refugees or several of them was actually half Azeri, half Armenian kids kind of also caught up in this whole conflict.
Interesting. And I remember you saying your father grew up in a neighborhood that had a lot of Armenians, right?
So when my father grew up in Kazakh in Eskipara, their village, the next hill over was an Armenian village, and they shared food. My grandma and her sister Navadnena would always say, "Oh, you know, whenever we bake bread, we make one extra loaf of bread and we take it over to our Armenian neighbors." And I'm sure the Armenian neighbors from the other side would do the same. A lot of them spoke broken Armenian, and a lot of the Armenians in the neighboring village spoke broken Azeri. So they communicated actually kind of like here we have Spanglish, Spanish and English mixture. Over there, especially in villages, it wasn't Russian. It was kind of like an Armenian Azeri Spanglish mixture. There was a lot of goodwill, and even though I grew up and I saw the First Karabakh War, I still grew up around stories of coexistence.
I see.
A lot of them.
So people still had contact, real contact.
Oh yeah.
More contact, more public.
And I
presence.
think I've told you this story, but I have a family member back in Baku who's still in Baku, who is an Armenian person. And, you know, during the war, it was just, we all knew there were a lot of Armenians and still are. And, you know, for example, there was one in my family. It was not really like, I'm sure it was very difficult for those people, and I kind of regret not talking to them about their experience. But I was a child and I didn't understand. Now that I'm an adult who lives in LA, I wish I could ask them what it was like for them. But in Baku, it was a very mixed population.
I see. And your mother's side, did she have any encounters with Armenians earlier on where she lived, or?
My mother actually grew up, spent part of her childhood in Ganja, and they actually lived in the Armenian quarter of Ganja, and she went to a school where she was the only Azeri girl, and it was mostly Armenian kids. Unfortunately, my mom doesn't have very good stories because she got bullied, and she was a straight A student in her school. And she got bullied because her classmates were very upset that she kind of ended the reign of this Makaratachan boy who was a straight A student before her. And when she came, she became the smartest one, so they would throw tomatoes at her.
Wow.
That's a story my mom told me.
Yeah. And both of your parents, I think, one is PhD, and your late father was also
both PhD in mathematics. So I grew up in a family of mathematicians. Yes.
Impressive.
Thank
Impressive. Great. A lot of interesting stories. Of course, we can talk more about them. But tell me a little about your experience living in Los Angeles. So you've lived here for how many years now?
I've lived here for 14 years.
14 years. Wow. Long time. So it is a city, or the county is full of Armenians.
Yes.
And not many Azeris. So what has been your experience living here, and especially how has your encounters with Armenians been like?
Great. I have millions of encounters with Armenian people. A lot of times when I talk to my family in Baku, they're a little concerned. They were very concerned during the war. But I'm always telling them, like, guys, it's only because you're over there and you're isolated. You think it's this crazy thing that I'm doing living in Los Angeles. It's not. My encounters are great. I run a business in LA, so as you can imagine, a lot of the people that I work with are Armenian. My vendors, actually one of my accountants who has a password to my laptop and access to all my financial records is half Armenian. My banker, my interactions are great. Armenian are wonderful people, and this might get me canceled, but I think Azeris and Armenians are more alike than any other two nations that I know.
Mhm.
I see a lot of similarities, and the two biggest differences are language and religion, specifically Eastern Armenians.
Great. Sounds great. And do you think this recent conflict, this recent war, did it bring you closer to more Armenians?
In some ways it did,
Mhm.
because I was here alone while all of this was happening. And it was a very difficult period for me emotionally. I think for a lot of people from the Caucasus, it was a very bad period, not just for me. And I became part of this group chat online of Azeris and Armenians, where it was a safe space to talk about things. The problem is when we talk about things publicly, we either get hated by the opposite side or by our own people. So if you say something anti-Armenian, Armenians hate you. If you say something anti-Azeri, Azeris hate you.
Or what is interpreted as
you.
anti-Armenian or anti-Azeri?
Thank you. It's not anti-Armenian. It's not anti-Azeri. It just is what it is. But people see what they want to see. So in public, it's very hard because people are ready to jump down your throat with strong words like traitor. Why are you friends with the enemy?
Mhm.
Don't trust them. They will stab you behind your back. And by the way, I'm saying this as an Azeri, but I've heard my Armenian friends echo the same sentiments told to them by their family and friends.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
almost an identical situation.
Mhm.
And it's been very difficult for me. Very, very, very difficult. But I find peace and a little bit of mental sanity in talking to people. And I think being isolated from each other is one of the reasons why we are where we are.
Mhm.
And nothing bad can come out of talking to the other side. And also, I live in LA. Let's just say, if you live in LA and you have no interactions with Armenians, you're doing something wrong.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So Uli, tell us about how your gelato was voted best ice cream in Los Angeles.
So my shop has been around, this downtown one, for 7 years. So we've been doing this. I've been doing this for longer than that, but the shop's been around for 7 years. And last summer, during the pandemic, we had a poll for the readers of Los Angeles magazine for best ice cream in the city of LA, and we were nominated. Woo! And over 6,000 people voted in that poll. Actually, more people that participate in local LA elections, so city council elections. So they voted it was the best ice cream.
Great, great. And you started the whole thing from scratch.
Yes.
From scratch, and
That's a big disappointment to my family.
and it's so impressive, to be honest.
Thank you.
The way you started from nothing, and look at what you have, and you have 2 branches by now, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
like-
Yeah.
And the ice cream tastes amazing. It's great.
The journey was extremely difficult and still is. I don't have much of a life. I dedicate every free moment that I have to work and also to my family. I have 2 young kids, and I live and breathe work and family. It's really hard. But I'm very happy. I don't know if you can tell. I'm a very happy person. And that comes from the fact that I do what I love.
Amazing. Your gelatos were voted the best ice cream in Los Angeles. Why are they so popular with people?
Well, the things that I do are not very complicated. I try to use the best ingredients. So it might sound very simple and it might sound like, why aren't people doing this anyway? But you would be surprised how a lot of the ice cream out there, they use artificial flavorings. You know, even for something like strawberry, there's an artificial flavoring. And why would you do that in a state like California, where you have some of the best farms, some of the best farmers markets? You can get, in all of America, you can get some of the most delicious strawberries in California. We're so lucky, so blessed to have these incredible growers and farmers. So I just try to get the best ingredients I can. If they're organic, they're organic. Not everything that I do is organic, because believe it or not all best fruit is organic. Organic is a very expensive certification, and some farmers who are just trying to make ends meet cannot afford it. So I use very good, clean ingredients. All of the recipes are my own. I make every single recipe from scratch. Every single flavor has its own recipe, so it's not like, oh, you make one base and then you add flavoring to it. I also, because I am an immigrant, and because I live in LA, in a city of immigrants, well, this is a country of immigrants, but it's more evident in a place like LA, where you have a lot of cultures, including a lot of Armenian people. I try to use LA as my source of inspiration for different flavors. So I actually have a lot of flavors honoring a lot of Mexican eateries around town. I have horchata, jamaica agua fresca with mint sorbet, mango chile, poblano. So I love Mexican food. So you'll find a lot of Mexican inspired flavors. I have a couple of flavors inspired by the Thai town, like coconut lemongrass sorbet, Thai iced tea, and so on and so forth. You're probably asking at this point, Arnold, Uli, where's the Armenian flavor? Well, let's just say there will be a little something coming up, but up until recently, I didn't feel safe as an Azerbaijani trying to do anything to represent Armenian culture or Armenian flavors. I didn't feel like it was my place to do it. Also because there's a tremendous amount of social pressure from a lot of our countries and communities. But now that we've experienced the traumatic experience of the Second War, I think it's time for people like me and others who live in neutral territories like LA. I know there are a lot of Azeris and Armenians who live and talk in Russia. I think it's time for us to speak out and to say things about coexistence and similarities between our two cultures, and just we need more peace initiatives. We need to talk to each other.
Well, Uli, it's a pleasure living in a city with you.
Aww,
It's a beautiful city, isn't it?
I love LA.
There's so many great things about LA.
I love LA.
Well, there's bad things like the traffic and so many other things, but it's a beautiful city.
Yin yang. You take the good was the bad, and the bad was the good.
Beautiful people, great people, warm people.
So.
Yeah. And
superior weather.
Right. Great weather. Uli, çok sağ ol.
Շնորհակալություն, Arnold.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers. Uli's gelato.
Should we start again?
No.
An Azeri woman, an Azerbaijani woman. Let me do it again.
It's fine.
Is Azeri woman or Azerbaijani better?
Doesn't matter. Ka-ching. Which is unfortunately still under, can I say occupation, or am I going to get...
You can say anything you want.
Okay.
That's fine.
Edit. I mean, it's under occupation, okay, guys? Whatever. Շնորհակալություն. Merci.